the sheet, sorry, the sheet where we collect questions. I don't know if you have access to that, Mr. Roger.
I don't, not on hand. I don't know if you have the questions on hand.
Okay, I'm trying to get it ready. So yeah, but we can take questions here. So as you know, I'm sure you know the drills, yeah, you guys. So before a GMS starts, we usually collect questions and put out forms where you ask your question, so it's addressed on the day of GMS. Or you could also leave your text or questions in the comments. Okay, so let's do that while we try to sort out the sheets. Okay, see if we have any new question. So if there is, I'm gonna let you guys know. But then, Mr. Roger, you can carry on, please. Thank you.
Okay, great. Yeah, so Anidika, just chatting about presentation. So whenever you need to do a presentation, there needs to be like, what is the outcome that you want the presentation to affect? So if you're speaking to the CEOs, are you applying for budget, or you want to show that how this can add to the business strategy, or that they should add, like what is the thing you want them to do differently from the presentation? That you need to get clear right up front. And once you've got that clear, put together your slides into a narrative of what order do we need to say things in order to land that. I'm just going to try and pull up an example of that on the side. Literally a presentation I put together yesterday. I'll run into the history and show you how I constructed it. So here is let me just share my screen. QE for Gmail. Not sure. Let's do that. Come on. This was share. What's coming out here? Window manager, probably that. Okay. I don't have permission. Sorry. Open system preferences. It's going to throw me into a circle. Okay, I can't share it right now. Yeah, there we go. Hand fingerprint. Okay, this is being way more complicated than I thought it would be. Okay. So yeah, basically what you need to do is you first need to have a core message of like, what is the outcome you want to affect? What is the change you want in the world? Do you want the finance person to sign off the budget? Do you want the finance person to understand why it's running over budget? Like, what is the core message you want to land? Or specifically, what is the action you want them to take differently? What are the slides? What are the core messages you need to land, or the pieces of information you need to have in order to get there? And so can you construct those slides, one core message per slide? So what is the key thing you want them to take away when they look at each slide? And if you tie all of those core messages together, if you read those together in a bullet point list, they should tell you the summary of how you plan on landing the story. And if they can't get the core message, or if you don't think those takeaways strung together is going to get you the outcome, you need to keep refining that until you've got that narrative down. And once you've got the core narrative down, then you can look and say, okay, here we need to show what's been done before. How might I show that? And then you start fleshing out the slides. And here we need to show these are the options we considered, and this is why we chose the option we did. Like, if that's what your narrative is, like the key phrase or key takeaway from each one, you will then flesh that slide out. And sometimes you'll flesh it out into two slides if it's too complex. But the point of having meetings is not just to throw information at people. The point of having meetings or doing a presentation is to get them to take a certain action. And so in order to take that action, they need to have a level of understanding or the thread that they need to tie together. And your slides need to tie those together. And then you flesh out the body of the content in order to fulfill on that narrative in order to get that action. So it's not like, you definitely should not be showing architectural diagrams to finance unless the complexity of the architecture or why you had to change architecture is a key message you need to land for the outcome you need from finance. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, so a friend of mine runs a presentation company, and he like teaches TED speakers on how to do like TED presentations and that sort of thing. He's like globally renowned, but he has a four-step method. Is give them a reason to care, give them a reason to believe, tell them what they need to know, and then tell them what they need to do. So I'll just put that in the chat very quickly. So it's one is a reason to care. Two is reason to believe. Three is what they need to know, and four is what they need to do. And so if you're talking to any like anything, if he does like TED Talks or presentations or like thought leadership, like standing on a stage at a conference type talking, this is the structure he follows. And it's a really solid structure. So the reason to care is, why are you talking to them today? Like why should they care? Why should they listen to what you're about to say? And so if it's an internal presentation, it's like, we understand there's been a budget overrun. I'm going to chat to you about how we got here and what we're going to do about it. That's the reason to care. The reason to believe, why should they believe you? Hopefully internally in the company, you've got, because of your role or because you're doing the presentation, you'll give them a reason to believe. If it's an external audience, you need to give them some kind of credibility, even 30 seconds on your background or some achievements you've done on why you are the right person to deliver this message to them. And then what they need to know, these are the things you need to know. And at the end, tie off with, this is what we need to do because of this is what we need to know. This is how you should change your life or take different actions. So this is what we need to implement in order to correct for this. And so that's the kind of overarching narrative format that he uses in delivering any kind of verbal message, through whether with slides or without. But that's how you construct an audible talk as you're going through things.
Sorry, just to follow up, can you help drop his name in the chat so I can scour around for any videos he has as well?
Yeah, he has ton. Richard Mulholland from Missing Link is the company. I think it's at MSNGLNK or something. It's like Missing Link is how they spell it. He's got a YouTube channel. He does like tons of talking stuff. You can find his reason to care, reason to believe, need to know, and need to do, his format in there. He's pretty open with his knowledge and stuff. I play board games with him. So it's like, I know him from a different context, but he's a smart cat. Cool. Hello, everybody.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Roger.
Awesome. What are some other tips? And if anyone else has any questions, feel free to throw it in the chat or raise your hand. Otherwise, I'm going to keep chatting about talking and presenting because I care quite deeply about this too. But another thing, whenever you need to deliver a talk, is to record yourself doing it. So just do a screen share and talk yourself through it. You can use Loom. You can use Slack video audio recording. You can even use Zoom or Google Meet with just you in the meeting. You record it, you talk through it, and then watch the recording back. And watching yourself say the thing over again or get the message across will help you, like, oh, this doesn't make sense at all. Oh, that sounds so bad. Oh, this or that. So actually, like, listen to yourself delivering it. Record yourself and then re-watch it again, take some notes and make changes. Is like a huge way of just improving delivery of content. It makes a massive difference. And the other thing is, if you have 30 minutes to do a talk or presentation, try and deliver it in a third of the time. So if you can deliver it in like 30 to max 50% of the time allocated to you, specifically for internal discussions or those sort of things. Because the core point, like what you want to get to, is you want to talk about not what you want to talk about, you want to talk about what they want to talk about. So if you're busy pitching to finance, if you spend that entire 30 minutes or that entire hour just answering their questions, like spend 5, maybe 10 minutes giving them context, and then spend the next 45 to 50 minutes just answering their questions and helping them get understanding and see where they're misunderstanding you and get clarity on that. That is by far going to be the most useful use of the time. So don't think, oh, I've got an hour's meeting and I need to present to them this project update. Don't think you need to speak for the whole time. You only need to speak for the first bit. As long as they've got the information, the questions, the discussion, what next, like all of that is the far more interesting part. So deliver what you need to deliver in a very clean, quick, succinct way, And often a way to do this is to have the core data in a deck, and you talk through it, and then you stop and you ask for questions. But then you prep a whole bunch of slides of questions they might ask, or like extra details that just didn't make sense to add in. And you add that as sort of the appendix. And then when the questions come up, you can just jump to the slide you need to, and you've got the additional information. So it shows that you're very well prepared, but you're not overloading them with information up front. You wait for them to ask the question, then you jump to the slide that answers their question. So that's another way of like keeping it really short and making it focusing more on an engaging part, instead of just like hammering them with tons of technical jargon and content, which just means they're going to open their email and start checking it on the side. Cool. Fiola.
Yeah, thank you, Roger. That was very helpful. I have written notes on, the structure of the presentation and all of that. So thank you for sharing that. So I have another question that is a bit related to that. So some context is I work on a B2B SaaS products for sales intelligence, and this product is used in like different markets across Europe, right? And so we have developed a lot of tutorials, and as with sales intelligence products, there are always like new features and new things and all of that, and it's a very complex product basically. So in light of like presentation and communication, I am sort of tasked with ensuring that people are using our tutorials more, because no one is using it. Like when we look at the stats, no one is reading it, no one is doing anything with it. And I understand why it's a lot of information and all that. But I'm just curious if you have any ideas, or anyone in the call, how you would like improve usage of product tutorials for B2B SaaS products. And for me, it's like, the question I'm asking is, why should I improve the usage of tutorials if there's another way for people to know how to use the product better? But I'm just curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll turn the question on you. Why does anybody do a tutorial?
Because they don't know how to use the product, or they are struggling with a feature, or they don't know how to use it for their specific use case.
Sure, but what they're trying to do in that case is they're trying to learn how to use the tool to better get their outcome done.
Mm-hmm.
So the most effective tutorials I've ever come across have been focused on, like, I'll help you do this.
Mm.
Like, this is the outcome you're trying to get.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a set of features, or here's three different approaches on how you might do that, depending on the nuance of your circumstance.
Yeah.
So instead of trying to be like, hey, this is how the tool works, this is where you click, this is how you do that, this is the outcome you want to achieve. These are the steps we need to follow in order to get there. Let me walk you through how to do those steps. And so you're delivering those steps to help me get to that point. And quite often, like, I love those YouTube videos that have markers pointed in them at the different steps. And they're like, I'm like, I know how to do steps 1, 2. I go, I need to jump to step 3. I can see on the thing, I jump straight to step 3. And then they can talk me through how to get that done. And sometimes I'm like, oh, wait, hold on, maybe I don't know how to do step 2, and I go back. But that structure means, like, the worst part of a tutorial is when you get started at the beginning and then I handhold you through and you can't click anywhere else, and you're going to follow every single motion that's like from like the most basic person. And so it's less about teaching them how to use your product and more about helping them understand how they can achieve their outcomes from what you do, by using your tool.
Yeah, I think that's very helpful. I also agree with you, because not many people actually use generally as a concept, not many people actually use tutorials for products. They just Google it, right? But like, my company has spent so much of like dollars into these, so I just have to, find ways to make them feel happy. I am more on the opinion of like community-led product growth. So for tools like Microsoft, for example, if I have an issue, I just Google it, and there's a support community where people. So I somehow feel like that's a better approach than just all of these recordings and videos. And what do you think?
Well, I would try and structure those videos and those recordings to be the best result when somebody searches that.
Right.
So, I mean, Google loves pushing like videos of like how-to videos as the results when you ask, like, how do I do this on Excel? And there's like, there's 1 or 2 text results, and then there's a bunch of videos, and then there's other ones. So, but if you're saying like, how do I use this feature? It's like, how do I use VLOOKUPs versus how do I pivot the table in that? So like, what is the outcome people want? What is the question they're going to ask to get to that outcome? And then structure your tutorial about answering that question, as opposed to this is how you use this feature.
Absolutely. So sort of focusing on like the outcome based question and then working backwards from there.
And that's naturally going to give you much better SEO, much better search ranking, discoverability, like all of those things without you doing anything differently for it. It's just you publishing that content, but you're publishing it in a way that people will want to look for it.
People want to look. And just the last one so that, other people can ask their questions is, so when it comes to updating this, because sales intelligence, there's always something new, there's always some new feature and all of that. So would you suggest that every time there's a new feature, there's also like this long tutorial and blah, blah, blah documentation to help people understand it? Or do you think there are like better ways to go about letting people know about new features?
Yeah, as I've just said, it's not about the feature. It's about the outcome. So does this new feature allow them to do things in new ways? And if so, that's the tutorial need to be. Hey, previously to achieve this outcome, you could do it this way or that way. We've just launched this new way for this certain use case that unlocks this value that you would have struggled with before. That's why we built the feature, right? And so you can communicate the help docs in an outcome-based way. And that's probably going to, my guess is, and I'll put money on this, is it would probably yield more interesting, more useful tutorials instead of just how to use this feature.
Yeah, so since you put money on it, I'll let you know how it goes after I've implemented.
I'm not a big betting man, so maybe like 1,000 naira, maybe 10,000.
No, 1,000 pounds, please.
1,000 pounds. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Roger.
Yeah, like the analogy people always use is like people don't want they don't want to drill, they want a hole in the wall. But actually, they don't want the hole in the wall. They want a picture how. So it's like if you're thinking about like what are they trying to achieve there, it doesn't help to try and advertise what is the best drill. You advertise we can make your pictures look beautiful, and here's the steps on how we can do that faster and quicker than anybody else. Like it's a slightly different mentality of how you think.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Sure thing. Best, I saw you had your hand up briefly there.
No, it's nothing. I wanted to ask what you were saying actually, but yeah, you answered correctly, so thank you. That was a good response.
Has anyone else had to write tutorial docs? Anyone got tips on how to do it better? I'm very much just an opinion here as well. I mean, I've been around for a bit.
What was it?
I don't have all the answers. Not everything I say is 100% right. So if anyone has something to add, or if you've done this recently, or if you have a hack or a tip that works, by all means, let me know. Or put your hand up. Come join us. Cool. If you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand or pop it in the chat. Or if you want to ask it anonymously, you can ask it in the activities thing in the Q&A. It all comes to the same place. Anidika.
Yeah, I'll probably just keep asking all the questions I have. So
it's your time.
Lenny dropped a new podcast with Matty Kagan. Hoping I'm getting that name correctly. I listened to it, I think at least most of it, if not all. And Matty was speaking about the product management theater, right? Spoke a bit about what he called variants of project management roles. So the product owner, the business analyst, scrum master, the likes, right? I want to kind of get your take on it and have a sense of how your product organization at OKHI is structured. If you have just product managers, if you have other roles in your product org, like scrum master, product owner, how you manage agile practices if you don't have any of those roles as well. And if there is no question after that, still following up on the presentation and all, your take on this quote unquote Amazon's practice of walking back. I think the lady mentioned it, Deola was, sorry, if I'm not pronouncing the name correctly, but she mentioned something around that, and I wanted to get your take on it. So I think they do like a press release and then walk back from that press release. Also, what your take on that is, if you've tried it before, and any benefits that you've gotten from it if you've tried that as well.
Sure, I have in a couple of different ways, but let me answer your first question first. So I haven't watched the latest interview with Marty Kagan, although I do follow him quite closely, so I think I know what he's going to say. I think the first thing to note is Marty Kagan is the cutting edge of the cutting edge. So he's working with some of the biggest, fanciest product orgs in some of the most developed markets. So I think that's also just worth putting his feedback in that context. Having said that, I do fundamentally believe my belief is very much aligned with his philosophy around product is fundamentally about value delivery, and everything else is just the details on how you deliver value, how you measure value. I always talk about a phrase of focus on product the way, not product the thing. And what I mean by that is, if you focus on the things, it's the project management aspect. That's the features, it's the delivery dates, it's the timelines, it's the user stories, it's all of those kind of details and shuffling those things around. But if you focus on the way in which an organization communicates, collaborates, and makes decisions, you can focus on the way in which you deliver value. And if you can focus on the way in which you deliver value, you'll deliver many great things. And so a lot of when Marty Kagan talks about like product management and product managers, to him, in the ideal, is about what he calls an empowered product manager. So it's a product organization that understands the core purpose of the organization is value delivery, and the core coordinator of value creation and value capture is the product management. It is the product team. And so if you think about the definition of product, you have it's understanding customer needs or solving for customer needs in ways that make money while understanding technical constraints. And it's the balance between those three areas that a product manager's ultimate responsibility lies. How do we understand what value we're delivering? How do we measure that? How do we identify that? How do we find gaps? How do we optimize that? How do we deliver things that customers can't articulate but clearly need and then solve their problem? And how do we do that in ways that are aligned with a business strategy that make us money, that give us a competitive edge, that help us stand out, while working with the dev team on the infrastructure and the tech and the products and what we already have? And so constantly balancing those three worlds is what product management is all about. I think the problem, my problem with like Marty's take is, in an ideal organization, that's how you do it. But you can't deliver like that in an organization where your senior executives aren't product focused. If your organization is not a product focused organization or a product led organization, like most corporates, and specifically in Africa, most of our businesses are not forward thinking product led organizations. Like they're just not. And the executives and the people who are at the top just aren't that way. And so for them, this whole mannerism is very foreign in how you do that. And so you can't operate as an empowered product manager in an organization that is completely disempowering you. And often as a mid-level or a junior or even often senior product manager, you don't have enough influence over the way of work, over the delivery, over the decision-making, over the way in which the teams communicate in order to affect that change. And so in those types of organizations, you need structures and you need rituals and you need frameworks to help you be more of those producty things in an organization that is not inherently product-based. And so that's where coming up with like SAFe or Scrum or the product owner roles or Scrum Masters, like all of those were just rigid structures to be brought in to help an organization that needs rigid structure to be more agile and sort of give them the permission to do things slightly differently, so that to create a number of different roles and titles to enable people to act differently to how business analysts or how people have acted before. Now, that's a necessary evil, and I totally agree with Marty that that's not the be-all and end-all, but you can't just say that all of that is nonsense and you must just do away with all of that. I think when companies focus too much on the structure of being agile, you're inherently not agile, and that's the tension they have. Agile, from back in the day, it kind of came out of rapid application development like RAD or XP, extreme programming, or like there was a whole bunch of different things that they threw together, and they kind of called it lightweight. It's initially was called lightweight lightweight software delivery. But obviously, nobody wanted to be a lightweight practitioner, so they kind of called it agile instead. And then that's where the whole agile manifesto came from. But it was really a fight or a break away from the rigidity of a waterfall type system. And so they created this new way of this new set of principles on how to deliver it. But in order to deliver that in environments that inherently aren't that, you need to kind of create structure, otherwise it'll just get crushed. And so that's kind of where you've created structures for those roles. So I don't think those roles are inherently bad. I think leaning too much into the structure is inherently bad in any way, shape, or form. So if you're like, we have to do Scrum, and this is the only way to do Scrum, and we have to check these boxes, and we have to then you're not being agile. You're not learning and iterating and shipping, and you're not focused on value delivery. So as soon as people are like, you have too many roles focusing on the structure, you're not focusing enough on value delivery. You're not creating shared accountability. You're not creating shared responsibility. And so that's where I see the dark side of those roles and those frameworks. I don't think they're inherently bad, but they're very easily abused by people wanting structure and rigidity. So they just slap an agile name on it and tell the people to go be agile within the structure and doing these things, following these exact checkboxes. So yeah, to answer that question, like I agree with the sentiment behind Marty Kagan's thing, but I think in the reality, specifically on this continent, where we're a couple of years behind, you can't like throw away all agile. Like there are cases when bringing in that kind of structure can help an organization that is more rigid actually be a bit more agile through those different types of roles. At OK High specifically, we're a startup. We're 17 people for the whole company. Most of that is developers. 7 of that is developers and data science. It's myself as CPO, and I have one senior product manager who works with me. He kind of focuses on. I focus on the strategic planning and like what we're building and the road mapping and the non-core products, but like how the core product adds value in the long run and the new products and the new things we're building around the edges to get us there. And he focuses on the core product functionality and optimization and efficiency and like stability and does it work across platforms and getting improvements to increase acquisition or conversions or like those sort of things within that. So he kind of focuses on the core and delivery of that. And I on the product scoping and stuff of that, and he has the ownership of that. And I work on the like where are we going to be in 18 months' time? What is the high level prioritization? How are we going to add value? Are we focusing on the right things? When should we drop something and move on? And all the sort of fringe products, like I rewrote the document. The documentation was like something I sat and wrote, like rewrote most of it. Like especially the non-technical documentation, or I'm writing sales decks and I'm in sales calls and chatting to customers and interviewing stuff around fraud, which is like a new space we're trying to unpack. So I spend a lot of my time doing that. He's in charge of team delivery and like Scrum stand-ups and making sure that the story points are getting through, making sure that like the T's are getting crossed and the I's are getting dotted. So we kind of break it up in that sense, but I wouldn't call him a Scrum Master because he still has strategic ownership over the core product and direction and what we're doing within that. So yeah, does that sort of answer your question?
Yeah, it does answer the first one. I don't know where I lie based on my own opinion of what practice is best, but I guess I still have some time to figure it out myself. But yeah, it does answer it. Yeah, to the second question around the one pagers, the press releases, Amazon style.
Yeah. So before I get to that Amazon style documentation, let me just hop on a little bit longer on this. So I wrote a blog post a little while ago. As some of you guys will know, I have a blog post for everything. But there's 10 principles behind great product teams. And I in that, I've just dropped it in the chat. But in that, there's 10 core principles. So metrics and measurements, customer centricity, learning loops and experimentation, being instinct informed, data validated, outcomes over outputs, clear, concise vision, acknowledging uncertainty, shared accountability, cross-functional inputs and decision-making, and adaptability and empowerment. And like those are the things that great product teams and empowered product teams, by Marty Kagan's language, has, and that's kind of what we need to be. But what I've found useful in the teams that I've been working with and coaching over the years is using this as a rubric to say, where are you strong or weak, or which one of these does your organization need to get better at? And then using the weak areas as a way to pick a tool or a framework that's going to help you deliver better within your context. So all the tools, and right at the bottom of this link, there's a link to a tools repository that I'm slowly building up that you can filter by these. So you can say, well, if I want to be better at learning loops and experimentation, I should probably use a now, next, later roadmap instead of a flight levels or instead of a timeline roadmap, because I need to encourage uncertainty and flexibility, and I need fuzziness into it. So the tools, the frameworks, the approaches you can pick can help nudge an organization that isn't one of these things to become more of that. And so it's not about always being Kanban, or always following safe, Scrum, or always doing safe, or always doing waterfall. Like, all of those frameworks have pros and cons and strengths and weaknesses. And it's about picking the right framework, methodology, or tool that counters for the weakness in your organizational setting and in your organizational structure. And I believe that you can use that to reflect, to get any team to become closer towards the ideal, the principles behind an ideal product team. And so that's kind of how I think about it, and think about it in powered product teams. It's not about always trying to be perfect at all of these things, but using that as a rubric to reflect on strengths and weaknesses, and using that to then choose a tool or a framework or an approach to help you compensate for things that you're not better at, that you want to get better at, if that makes sense. I'm just going to do one more thing that talks. So I've actually done a workshop, a video on this. I'm just going to drop the link in here as well. But yeah, there's a talk of me talking about it for an hour. This is the first time I delivered that talk, so I've done it about 2 or 3 times since, and I like to think it's gotten better. But that was the one that was recorded. But right at the top, there's the 10 principles behind great product teams, and using that, I did that to a design community, and so using, like, actually trying to talk through and reason through the content. So there's a blog post, there's a talk running through how do you think about this framework, and a lot of that was inspired by Marty Kagan's Empowered Product Teams, or Inspired or Empowered, his two books. So a lot of it is tied to that, but for me, it's less like, oh, this is the right way to do product and that's the wrong way, and more about, hey, how do we use an ideal to reflect and help people get better? So to your second question, any questions on that? Anyone want to ask a follow-up question before I tack off onto Amazon's documentation? Nope. Cool. So to your second question around the Amazon documentation of working backwards, I've used this before. I've written, there's typically 2 approaches that we use. In fact, there's 3 approaches that I try and use from time to time. Once again, when I feel we need to compensate for that sort of thing. The one that I've used is a future dated press release. So we've got a big release coming up at the end of April. It was supposed to be end of this quarter, but we had some delays on the architecture, so we're going to push it out end of April. But there's a whole bunch of big changes. And so I wrote a press release back in January for what we hope to be able to release in Q2. These are all the things we want to be able to say. And I articulated it in like a press release style of, this is the benefits, and this is what it now enables. And so I wasn't talking about these are the things we've shipped. It's like, you can now do this, or now we're catering for this, or so I kind of wrote a future dated blog post, and I used that then to kind of, when I was fleshing out the PRDs and fleshing out the scoping, to say, actually, are we going to enable that world? So imagining the world that you want to be able to be in, and then the announcement you want to be able to make can often help you refine and define what you should be shipping on and how to focus on that. So that's one thing I've used, the future dated press release. Another one we looked at, which is an Amazon format that we often do when we have a big release or a big change or a big customer going live, is we do a pre-post-mortem, or I think they call it a pre-mortem, but it's basically get the whole team together, or a cross-functional section of the team, thinking, if this project, like, what are all the ways this project could fail? And let's think about it, like, instead of doing a retro of like, when an issue happens, you solve it, and then you do a retro of, okay, what actually happened? What could we have done better? And you kind of reflect on that disaster. What happens if you could do that reflection before the disasters happen? And how can you think through what could go wrong? What are the implications of that? How might you correct for that? And so by doing a pre-mortem, it's like, what are the things that would kill us? Let's list all of them down. Let's list all the risks. Let's list all the things that could go wrong. And then we reflect on what can we do now to try and mitigate those risks. And so we found hugely valuable with the team whenever there's a big release of just what are the things that could kill us at the end of this or through this next process or through this next release, and then use the ways in which you fix or mitigate against those to try and that becomes your to-do list or your checklist while you're waiting for them to sign the contract or while you're prepping to go ready. And so that's been quite useful. And then the third one we've started doing, we do it in some cases, not in all meetings, but we do it in our leads meeting with our executives. We write a document beforehand. So before the meeting, there's a running document, and each meeting has a different section. And anyone who wants to share something or discuss a topic writes it out first. And everyone reads that before the meeting. So by the time you come into the meeting, we assume you've read that. We're not discussing facts. We're discussing opinions of the facts that were shared. And so that the memo, the meeting memo, is also an Amazon thing that has worked really well for us. But like I said, we don't do it for every meeting. We do it for leads meetings or for certain situations. Like, it's all of these things are just tools. You should pick the tools out of the toolbox for when they're going to help you be more effective, not just hit everything with a hammer or a screwdriver. That was a lot, Daniel. Does that get your questions?
Yeah, it was a bit of a lot, but yeah, it does answer the questions. There's another question in the chat, so I think I'll just allow you to answer that one before I ask any other follow-up.
Cool. What tool is best when building up your portfolio as a beginner? I don't quite know what the person is asking here. There's a couple of different tools you could use. So if you're talking about how to release or how to publish your portfolio, I don't know. I use Coda or Notion, or my personal blog, that one that I just sent there, is on Google Sites. The reason I use Google Sites is because it's the only free website builder, drag and drop website builder, that you can put your own custom domain on without having to pay. So there's a quick hack like Squarespace or Wix or any of the other ones. If you want to add your own domain, you've got to pay a monthly or annual license. For sites.google.com, on any Google account, it's like Docs or Sheets or whatever. It's totally free. It's pretty simple. It's drag and drop, but you can put it on your custom domain for free. So, like, if you're wanting to publish things, I don't think it really matters where you publish it. It more matters what you publish. So then the second type of tool you could use is how do you deliver the project? So maybe let me start with the other part, which is what should be in your portfolio. And I think a lot of people use portfolio in different ways. Typically, what you want your portfolio to do is to showcase your skills. So if you're an analytics person, you probably want to do an analytics report or something like that. If you're a designer, you probably want to do some mock-ups or show some examples of projects you've built before, designs, or rethink up a feature, add a feature into LinkedIn and mock up the designs for it, or add a feature into Kudo. I wish Kudo did this. Here's a mock-up of a couple of flows. This is what it might look like. This is how it would interact. This is how it would interpret and apply their design language into this framework or structure. I think what should go into your portfolio will depend massively on how you're trying to stand out as a PM, and it will lean into whatever strengths, and should really just showcase what those strengths are. So there's no single tool of what that product should look like. But if you are looking at showcasing something, if you don't know what to put in your portfolio, just build something like a low-code tool. Use Retooled or Webflow or like Adalo. You can drag, it's a low-code app builder. Just build a small side project and show end-to-end your thinking and your process. This is the problem I try to solve. Here's some screenshots of an initial prototype that I did. Here's a sketch of a wireframe of how the wireframes of the process flow. Here's a little user journey that I did in my notebook. Take a photo, show the messy, creative process that gets you towards something that's polished and hey, here's my app live in the App Store. Here's just screenshots of the app I ended up building. Here's a web URL that you can go and play with it yourself. but just build something. Build a story title generator, like a random story generator, or build a dice app, or like whatever it is. I build a little app to help you and your friends remember who paid for coffee last. Like, I don't care. It's not about what the app is, but often if you're trying to showcase what you can do, and this is something that somebody from like any experience level can start doing, and just start playing with building it and seeing, how can I make this look better, or how do I get feedback, and share the creation journey of the steps that you follow and the thinking and the stuff you threw away. Like, these are 3 options I did, and then I ended up undoing it and it went this way. Like, as an employer, when I look at someone who's gone through that process and had to like cut stuff and make decisions, like, that's far more valuable than just seeing 3 or 4 screenshots of the finished product. And I don't know like how much they did, how much somebody else did. Like, did the AI just generate this? Like, did they get it right the first time, or where did they go wrong? And are they clear or vulnerable about that process and the messiness of the process? So yeah, so when you talk about tools, like, yeah, do you want a publishing? Do you want a website publishing tool? Do you want a frameworks tool? Do you want a prototyping tool? I think there's lots of options out there. I don't know who asked that question, but I hope that answered it. If it didn't, put your hand up. Anyone else? Any questions? This is your time. There's 10 minutes left. Ask me anything you like. Or ask other people on the call. If I don't have the answer, I don't have all the answers. I'm also trying to work it out like you guys. No questions? Easy night? When you're thinking, you got another question in there.
Yeah, so I don't have. Okay, someone has a hand up, so let's get it.
Ifeoluwa, sorry.
Yeah, you can just call me Ife.
Ife, no, I want to get it right.
Most people call me Ife, actually. So a question I had, it's not really a question really, but just to spark conversation, is apart from like tools like Jira, how do you sort of monitor progress on tasks in your roadmap when there are a lot of things? So they are like bug fixes, and so how do you just measure the progress apart from just writing tickets and the software itself here?
Yeah, so we actually use, I have 2 different levels that I manage, in fact, technically 3, that I manage what we're working on. So firstly, every quarter, I create another version or a modified version of the product strategy. Often it's just minor tweaks, but at the end of I normally don't change the product strategy much because that changes about once every 18 months. But at the end of that, I've got just a little paragraph with like the things that I expect to release each quarter. And so every quarter, at least, I review that to say, what did we actually ship? What's been pushed out to next quarter? What have we decided not to build? Like, how have we changed our mind? So that's at a super, super high level. And in fact, maybe before I go through these 3 layers, let me just unpack. So flight levels is probably the architecture that it's flightlevels.org, I think is the website. Let me just double check this, but it's it basically has no, it's not that. Flightlevels.io, there we go. So it's basically the theory there is you have planning at different layers of different levels of fidelity. So when you're flying in a plane at 30,000 feet at cruising altitude, you can see the mountains and the coastline. And that's kind of it, maybe the major rivers. And then when you're flying at like 15,000 feet or 10,000 feet, you can see the cities and you see the highways and you see sort of the more details in between the mountains and the rivers. And when you're flying at like 5,000 feet, you can see the people in the yard and the dogs running around. And so that's like super, super level detail, but you can obviously only see a lot less at that fidelity. And so the idea behind the flight levels structure is that you can communicate at an executive level on like the big boulders. What are the big stones that people need to be aware of? And then the layer below that is the coordination layer. So what do teams need to know? Like, when is a release going to happen? When is a release getting pushed out? Like, what are the big features or the big things that need a coordination across multiple teams or departments? And then the lowest level is the highest detail is your backlog for your team. So internally in the team, what are the stories or the tickets or the tasks or the stuff that we're doing? And so if you think about it at that level, you should be able to draw a string or a line between any individual task on your team board to what's being communicated at a team coordination level, as well as what's communicated at the exco level. And so that's kind of the approach that I take. So on my strategic level, it's like one little bullet point of like, this is for the next 12 months or the next 18 months, these is what I'm expecting to release each quarter, like the major features, major stuff. It's like 1 or 2 words per thing. Then I have a Kanban board that has every quarter as a sort of the quarters past. And then I have this sprint, next sprint, this quarter, next quarter, and someday. Like those are kind of what my columns are. And the levels there are like, what are we working on this sprint? I should be able to look at that board and see all the things I'm working on this sprint and the things that I expect to tackle next sprint, or and the things that we're hoping to still get done this quarter. It's not every single item, it's not every single list, it's not all the details. And so we do that in Coda. So I use Coda as a sort of a basic Kanban, but you could do it in Asana or any kind of like non-super techy thing. And the point of that is like, we're working on this project. It's not every single task or subtask or things tied into that. It's just, this is the project. This is like the epic, if you will. It's like the epic that we're working on. The one is like the major release of the theme. Then we have an epic, and then you have the tasks. And so my board that I operated is at an epic level, and then we use linear for the actual tasks. And that's every single task and every developer and what they're getting done each sprint and things. And so when we do sprint planning, I work on the strategic layer and down to the epic layer. So like this sprint, these are the epics that we're working on. And sometimes tasks will stay over 2 or 3 sprints. But that's the level that I operate on, and I run the whole team through that. This is what the priorities are. This is what we're focusing on next. We're explicitly not doing those things now. We need to get these things right. This is the order. We need to do this one before we do that one because of this reason, whatever. So I give them that context, and then they can manage their own tasks. And then they go into linear. They add the tasks that they need to do for the user stories, for the things that they need to deliver in order to execute against those epics. And then my senior PM, Douglas, he kind of runs through the sprint planning and the scrums, and like checks in like midway in the sprint, how many story points are people working on, and are they going to get done in the sprint, and those sort of things. So we still manage that level, but I don't do my planning with all that level of detail. We do the planning of like, if you think of like the big stones, medium stones in the sand to kind of fill up a jar. We start with what are the big stones. Then each sprint I say, these are the medium-sized stones, these are the epics that we need to work on. These are the priorities are for the next 2 weeks. And then the team can work out themselves. So they're an empowered product team. They can prioritize, they can push things out, they need to communicate when they need to shuffle things on, they're not going to hit their deadlines, they're not going to make their release. They need to communicate that, and they have a responsibility to do that, and we're very open and transparent in it. But it's not like me trying to control every single task and just, I'm not showing executives. Like, in fact, only the product team has access to linear. Only the engineers on the product team has access to linear. Nobody else in the organization does. So it kind of forces, whenever we communicate wider, it needs to be at a higher level without that detail. Because like, we should never be showing Jira to marketing people. Like, they just their eyes will glaze over. So find another way of reflecting epics. Or like in Jira, you show the road mapping. You can tie things up into projects, or you tie them up into epics. Talk to the marketing people at that level. This is the stuff we're working on. They don't need to know what the tasks are. You can just talk about that, because that's where they're going to need to coordinate when it releases. What do you need from design in order to like get there, or like that's the kind of thing that you need to like operate at a coordination level. And so those are the levels that I work on. It's loosely based off the flight level structure, but I find actually having different tools for those different levels helps. Means I need to keep consistent language across it, so you'll still see same language, project, or epic name all the way through, but it's different levels of fidelity for different teams.
Okay, yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you. So some of the tools you use are Linear, Coda, and Asana.
Yeah, so the rest of the company actually uses Asana for task management. We use Linear. So I use the mid-level. I use as Coda. You could use Notion instead. You could use Google Docs. You could use like a road mapping tool in Jira for it. You could use Jira instead of Linear. Like if you're using ClickUp, it kind of ties all three of those. There's different tools within ClickUp for each of those things. So Yeah, you could do all the tasks in Asana, although I find developers struggle with that.
Yeah.
It's just not as efficient because you can't tie it to Git releases.
Yeah.
That's the feature that really wins them over.
Mhm.
But I find having developers in a different place to non-developers helps create a bit of a separation as
Yeah.
well. That's a good thing, not
Yeah.
a bad thing.
Yeah. Thank you. That's very helpful.
Does anyone else have suggestions on tools that you use, or a tool that you love using, or some reflection on some of the stuff I've just shared about tools, or like how do you guys manage epics? Do you use epics? Do you use like stories? Do you any feedback from anyone else? I feel like I've done lots of talking this time.
So for me, I'm not an expert on tools. So I'm just going to give like insights on what we personally do. So we use Jira to manage tasks. I think following the different heights that you've mentioned, it kind of stops at middle level with Jira. So with like our head of product, that's where it stops. Then if you're going more top level or outside of the products or engineering organization, we do more presentations. So if you are speaking to marketing, is more of doing a presentation to marketing of this is what we plan to do this quarter, this is how far we've gone, this is what we need from you, basically. Right. So it's more high level personal.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Even if you create a separate set of epics that aren't like directly tied to the task, but map the language maps, that you can create a bit of a roadmap for marketing, like a non-technical roadmap, if you will, and kind of balance that. But yeah, you can play with it. But yeah, generally you don't want to be showing Jira tickets to marketing. it's not a good look.
Hi, Roger.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you for that. So I just want to add, I think you could really deploy whatever tool that works, right? You could even go as far as using Google Sheets, But then I think it depends. Yeah, for epics, Jira is good for managing epics, really, but it could be complex for some people who are not so familiar with that. So I think they have
Google Sheets is great for epics too. You can also have
exactly,
epics in
yes,
Google
exactly.
Sheets. You can have themes, epics, and tasks all in Google Sheets.
Exactly.
I've done it before.
So you could go, you could deploy anything really, which whatever works, provided it gets the job done. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's what I think, Sean. So
Yeah, absolutely. It's not about the tool. It's more about how
exactly.
you're structuring the language. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we've covered a lot. Someone said paper and pen. No, yeah, there are minor tools. Trello is also there. There is Asana, there is Aha, whichever one works really. But all those ones are more technical. I sort of think they're more technical in a way because not everybody knows how to use them, right? So you probably might want to make or trying to get a short presentation or something. You don't have to use any of these complex tools. You could just deploy Google Docs, Google Sheet as well. Whatever works, provided it gets the job done. That's what I think. But then, yeah, for most of us, we need a couple of others too.
Best to build on that, it's more about the framework of how you think about how the tasks are connected to strategic objectives.
Exactly.
And so having that framework is important.
Yeah.
Which tools you put it in at which levels is actually less.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. So I think that's it. You got it right, really. So that's that for me, really. So,
I got it with your help.
Thank you, guys, for coming in. Do you have any last thing to say, Roger? So before we call it.
No, I think, we're here every 2 weeks. It's not always me, but it is quite often recently. But yeah, otherwise, if you want to connect with me, feel free to drop questions in the questions channel. I do try and answer them there. Specifically, if you tag me, I'll definitely answer it. Otherwise, find me on LinkedIn or Twitter at Roger Nort or Medium, whatever.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you. So, guys, there's a Google form for collecting questions, right? So we'll try to put that out as soon as possible so you guys can leave your questions for next time, for next GMS. So he will try to always attend to that. Okay. So why we do that is so we collect enough questions we're going to attend to each time we come on here. Do you understand that? Yeah, so we'll leave the form and the Slack channel. So do well to submit your questions. You might not have them here. You might be in the course of your work, right, during the week. As you're working or trying to meet tasks, and yeah, you could leave the questions. Do you understand? So we'll try to always answer them. Okay. I think with that we've come to the end of today's GMS. Thank you guys for coming in. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Go build cool stuff.
Thank you, Roger. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Sure thing.
Thank you, Roger.
Samuel, you there?
Hi, Roger. Yes, I am.
Do you want to stick around for just 2 minutes quickly?
Yeah,
People are talking.
we have a pending conversation.
Yeah.
Yes.
I feel like